1,000 stories in the Envisioners' future. This is just one of them. Well, hello, how the devil are you? Dave Coplin here, another live stream, dialing into the future of work. This week, we've got my favorite ever topic. It's a conversation we've had several times as we've gone through this, and it's about skills. And it's about the kind of skills we're all going to need to be successful. But we're going to talk about kids a lot too, because we're going to talk about the kind of transition that we need to make about thinking about the skills that they're going to need to be successful. But before we get there, what are you doing on Saturday? What are you doing on Saturday from about midday until about midday on Sunday? Because if you're interested in all of the conversations that we've been having here, if you're interested in science in general, but not just science, we've got science, comedy, poetry, music. We're going to be doing some stuff as part of the Cosmic Shambles 9 Lessons for Curious People, socially distanced version. Those mad guys at Cosmic Shambles are basically getting Robin Ince, poor Robin, to host a live stream for 24 hours. Robin's going to be at King's Place in King's Cross, where we would normally run the show from, but he's going to be doing it there. We've all of the different scientists. We've got Brian Cox, we've got astronauts, we've got Eric Idle's going to be there, bizarrely. Oh, just this amazing lineup, and we're all going to be there, and it's going to be basically 24 hours. It's the kind of thing that if you're interested in this, if your kids are interested in this, just stick it on YouTube somewhere and just have it playing in the background, because I guarantee you, as you'll be looked for it, we each get 7 minutes to give some content to it. You'll enjoy it. I'm just going to play the trailer, and then I'm going to get back to you about skills for the future. So like I say, it's going to be a blast. It's always really, really funny. There's always loads going on. And Robin, I mean, bless him. I don't know how he's going to manage doing 24 hours straight, but he's always just brilliant at keeping everybody under control, sort of. But there'll be lasers, there'll be experiments. I'm sure there'll be sort of melting things with acid, all of the stuff that you would expect from those guys. So you want to be there. So, and the reason for sort of talking about that is obviously as a segue into this whole thing about skills, because I think the kind of people who are interested in the content that we'll be playing on Saturday is actually the kind of people who'd be interested in this conversation that we're going to have today. So look, with no further ado, I want to bring in Joe Moretti. Now Joe, I met Joe a couple of weeks ago doing a live stream on creativity for schools, and I was absolutely blown away by his story, because he is a distinguished educator. He's had 40 years helping sort of kids engage with technology. What I love most about his story, and this won't be a surprise to you, is the fact that technology is not the end result of sort of what he thinks about education, but technology becomes the platform for learning. And that's why I was absolutely delighted to be able to get Joe to come on the show. So Joe, thanks ever so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. It's great to be here. Thanks for giving me time to talk about this. A bit of a shock when you said 40 years, almost 40 years, but yeah.
It's terrifying, isn't it? Because I do the same, and I think, my God, we are old farts in this world. But you know what? That means that we've got wisdom and experience, Joe. That's what I keep telling myself. So look, what I'd love you to do, just as an opener, could you just give a little bit of your background? But what I'm really interested in is this thing that you've created, this thing called SleuthIT, that really, really resonated with me, and I really love. Could you sort of give a little bit of background to yourself, and then talk to us about this project that you're working on right now?
Well, a short summary would be, 40 years in education, primary trained, 5-6 years in primary, and then moved into secondary. Then moved into, we've got further education, which is 16 plus, and then another 5 higher education. So from the really small ones to the ones that, with all the attitude, right the way through to the age group. And in all that time, there was a sort of growing interest and use of technology, not least as a musician and music technologist. So for about the past 15 years, a lot of the work I've done has been focused on working with schools and still is on implementing technology and using it effectively, which is great. It's very exciting. It's very stimulating. And the technology that has evolved in the past 10 years is absolutely astonishing in terms of what it facilitates and what we can do with it. And so a lot of that focus was on using that technology effectively. However, I think there was a sort of single message that kept coming back as I was going into these schools and working with these teachers, which was um, developing critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, being able to think for yourself, and not just focusing on a education system that looked at standardized assessment, and in particular literacy, and in particular with boys. So we know that globally, year on, year out, fewer students are choosing to pick up a book outside of the classroom or outside of school by choice. And if you look at the world we live in now, it's not a surprise. The extent of the distraction, if you like, from PlayStations and Xboxes, and they're wonderful. I mean, gamification or gaming that's out there, or these devices as a distraction to your students and their everyday life. So many schools were turning to me and saying, we love the technology and it does some great stuff, but what about a focus on literacy? And there was a sort of synchronicity with stuff I was doing socially. My wife and I, we both love murder mysteries, escape rooms, and we were starting to sort of do them socially. You know, people would come over and Fee and I would write these, and she would do all the complex bits in terms of having a good story. And then it struck me that at that time, particularly the iPad, although now with SleuthIT we've gone completely cross-platform. That's what the reason why I asked to come on the show was to talk about the fact this was that the technology would allow me to start creating the interactive widgets that you might experience in an escape room. So the schools I was working with, we put together a really early version, basically called MasterChef. And what I found was that by taking the elements of a sort of Sherlock Holmes with an escape room meets Cluedo, and build in all the pedagogical elements and the critical thinking and challenging them to think, we found that they naturally did the other things that were really desirable. So they started collaborating, communicating, looking at the different pieces. And we realized we had something that engaged the students, but actually it wasn't just of the moment or for an afternoon, but if it was constructed properly, which is what we've done with SleuthIT, the games would stretch over a 5 to 10 week period. And we then began putting together resources to scaffold that work. So each of our currently 12 games, which go from the age of 6 to 16, 6 to 18, they come with a vast range of resources to give the scaffolding with a detective journal, which would lead the students through all the episodes of each game as they basically attempt to solve the case. And the thing is that we talk about collaboration, and quite often within a subject, you'll be able to create a situation where you might create peer-to-peer work, peer-to-peer feedback. But in fact, getting collaboration where a student is then able to be in a position to talk about something and the other one is weighing it up and actually put pieces together that, if you've ever done an escape room, you'll know what I'm talking about here. You have this, 10 minutes later, you need to reference something else. You put those two pieces together and maybe well be thinking outside the box. And at first they don't seem to fit until a third person comes in and actually you put the whole thing together. So it's kind of Sherlock Holmes meets CSI meets escape room meets Cluedo, and you've got it with all the education resources. And for the last 4 years, that's what we've been doing.
And it's amazing because what I love about it is you're using technology to facilitate that learning. And it's not just about reading, is it? It's also about things like, critical thinking and collaboration and creativity, all of the things that certainly, in the conversation we have here every Wednesday night, we know are going to be far more important in terms of people being able to thrive, in whatever world of work we're going into in the future. So it's lovely to see that being brought to life. So how do sort of schools react to it, Joe? Are they reaching out to you? Are you having to knock the door to them, or is it a bit of both?
Well, originally, because of what I do, I've been working with a lot of schools, and I'm very lucky. I'm tending to work with educators globally and schools globally that I would say have got their head above the parapet, because they are digital innovators. So if I took SleuthIT to them and said, have a look at this, can we try it with the class, etc. It was really cool, actually, because the very early ones taught me so much. As the students were playing with the game, I then saw cool ideas that the students actually were going, well, we're doing this. So by its very nature, I was working with digital innovators or people with great ideas, or just open to looking at new, something new to engage. And it's taken about 3 to 4 years of that slowly moving ahead. I mean, it is amazing how difficult it is, even when everybody says this is great. I mean, look at the engagement. We've got a fantastic teacher called Andrew Lynch in Belleville in London, absolutely raving about it. And he does a crazy thing. Our games are designed for 5 to 10 weeks. 3 of our games are focused on topic areas such as the solar system. A riddle of Rome is ancient Rome and then ancient Egypt. He doesn't do that. He actually says, I'm going to do the game from 9 o'clock in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon, and that's it. You will complete this case.
Wow.
And I said, and does it work? He said, well, we take all the education bits you've put in, all the hundreds of hours of work on papyrus, mummification, Egyptian gods, etc. And he said, by 3 o'clock, they've got to present the case, solve it to themselves. And I said, well, surely by lunchtime they're sick of it. And he said, I can't get rid of them. But the thing is, you were talking about critical thinking. How do you create scenarios to encourage critical thinking in your mainstream? And he says that they are walking out of the classroom arguing the points of the case. For example, in MasterChef, why would Chef X bump off the judge if he was in first place? Where another student then says, is it a double bluff because of what he did last year? And that guy's been winning for 6 years or whatever. That, to me, is where people are evaluating information. Yeah. There's inference and arguing a point. Now, how do you quantify that? And that's what teachers are saying to me the games are encouraging and facilitating. So I guess we're working with schools across about 12 countries at the moment, right the way from the UK, right across Europe to the UAE. And it's kind of got to the point now where schools are actually coming to us either through our website. And we've been around enough for people to see that we're going to be sort of staying here a while longer. Education is a strange beast in terms of its adoption. It can take 9 months for a school to be thinking about it. And all of a sudden, we thought they were going to take a game, and they've actually bought 11 games from us. And that's been great. But 9 months is the process it all goes through before they're actually going to take it on board. But it is, the ripples are getting bigger.
Yeah, it's funny because we've been talking a lot about this. Obviously, education isn't the only focus of what we talk about here, but we've talked about it a lot because it's so fundamental to the future of work. And the challenge is always that it relies on teachers being open-minded enough and bold enough, right, to want to step out and engage in these things. And, the pandemic's been an interesting experience because I think it's pushed teachers, who are already doing amazing things, it's pushed them even harder. And I think some of them are starting to realize that there is so much in what can be taught in this way. And in terms of, I think what's crucial, and you talk about boys in reading as one example, but being able to engage the kids in a in a language and a medium that is already familiar with them. And I think that's really important. And it's not that one is better than the other. They're all part of the rich spectrum of the way that we consume information. And I think helping them to see that and helping to understand, but then driving that conversation is really, really sort of fruitful. The stories must be hard to develop, though. I mean, it's interesting in that sort of process, because you've got to sort of marry the entertainment side with the education side. Is that a challenge in terms of how you bring these things together?
Trams, you've really hit on not only is it a really good point, it's one that Fee, my wife, and I work on a lot. First of all, she writes the stories, and the stories are the most crucial point. And I liken it to a good film. And if you think of Star Wars, the first 3 films, everybody agrees, okay, it's a pretty cheesy story, but it was a gripping story and people liked it. If you look at the 3 films that came afterwards, for all the CGI and the amazing graphics, they fell down on good plot and good characterization. So the games typically take 2 to 3 months of writing and development. One of the longest ones we did is The Mystery of Shakespeare's Globe, which is based on six Shakespeare plays, by the way. So when you go into the square in Verona, the Montagues are kicking hell out of the Capulets, and all of that kind of language is there. She spent months putting the story together that it not only did it hang together very well and convincingly, but it also parallels all the themes of the 6 plays, which I don't know how she did it. So that element, I'm happy to actually say, we come up with an idea. We've got some new games coming called the Sherlock Club, 4 kind of dysfunctional kids with a big dog called Sherlock. Think Famous Five, if you remember them.
Yeah,
meets the Goonies, meets Stranger Things within a sort of story framework. And once we sort of kicked an idea around, I just, okay, off you go and make a great story with it. And she has the ability to do that, which is great. So from the other point of view, I then get to drop in working with the graphics, which I kind of upskilled for about 2 years to work with a thing called iClone and produce all the graphics. It's a bit like Unity without the coding.
Right.
The point I was going back to was that you've got to have a combination of a great story. But today, I think educational resources have got to look good. I mean, look at the outside world. You go look at the experience you get in a cinema with surround sound and the most incredible filmific experience. We were watching a film before the lockdown. An advert came up for FIFA, the game. I honestly thought I was looking at live football.
Yeah. But, I've been talking to my son a lot about this recently, and also Gary, another regular contributor to the show. And so the reality of life, I think, certainly for kids or young people, is, the kind of communication and collaboration tools that they've got available to the media creation tools they've got available to them are phenomenal. And, as we were having a laugh before we went on air about our history, because we go back quite a long way with Apple. And I remember, my sort of skills with Aldous PageMaker, I'll have you know, were legendary. And because I could present myself better on paper than a lot of other people, actually, it did me a lot of good in my career. I was able to communicate more effectively in an organization because I could present it. And so I was having this conversation with John, my son, and I'm sort of talking to him about live streaming and saying, actually, the better you can present yourself online, the better you can engage with all of this different media, learn Premiere, learn Unity, learn whatever, because although, it may feel frivolous now, these are all going to be part of your arsenal. So I think it's really important that we're engaging with those mediums and we're helping people, do stuff that's fit for purpose. Gary's point is, the schools, and in particular, talk about further education and maybe even higher education. Well, why aren't they building a media lab, with a camera and a USB mic, and let's get the kids teaching the teachers to live stream the lessons and bring some of these things in. And I think, what I love about SleuthIT is not only is that you've got that great experience, I think you can also point to that as an example of the kind of thing that's possible when you've got a great story and when you've got an understanding of the kind of sort of facts and knowledge that you want to be able to impart. And I think that's, for me, it's a great definition of education. Sorry, Joe.
No, it was a really important point that you made. And actually, going on from that, focusing on literacy, we also decided we would integrate things where they were using the tools, whether it's an iPad or a Chromebook or whatever. But the fact is, I've seen too much of the use of technology to do Google searching and email. So part of the idea of the resource is not only is it scaffolding you to read and engage with text, take you all the way through solving the case, but we've integrated creative projects that put the student in the position of, for example, here's the template for a front page of a newspaper. This is going out tomorrow. What is your front page going to be? So how can creative writing be exciting and engaging, and then thinking about, right, I'm actually making something, or dropping in a picture from a screenshot from the game, putting you in front of a green screen. Now you're going to do a 60-second news broadcast. You are the reporter at the scene of the crime for film star fatality. Right. Sell it to your audience in 60 seconds. That's exciting stuff, but it makes context from what the game is doing to have these creative projects to add to the arsenal of the student as a creative producer. And these are transferable skills. We talk about these things, but unfortunately, too much of education's focus is saying, I'd like to do that, but in 6 months' time, you need to get 19 out of 20 or pass that exam. Yeah. And that is the problem. I'm coming up against that all the time. And it is exciting that, I'm working with a school in Dubai at the moment called SleuthIT, and they're just opening up, working with this to how it will integrate and how many hours they put aside, because they recognize the value of this game for their students to read, be better readers, better thinkers, and better communicators.
Yeah, but look, you really hit on the issue for me, and I think we were discussing this the other night. It's heartbreaking, the whole sort of teaching to the test thing, and I understand, we've created a system that drives this behaviour, but Ian Phillips, who comes on a lot to talk about sort of technology and education, and one of the things I think you're talking about here, with the game does, is it kind of takes the technology out of the IT lab. And I hate the fact that, IT is the thing that you do, when the laptop trolley comes out, or in the IT room. And we had this conversation pre-pandemic. I have a good rant about the fact that 95% of schools actively ban devices in classes. Now, I'm sure that's no longer true, but this whole sort of pivot of turning education into the platform for learning and really engaging with it. And look, I'm going to press one of your buttons, Joe, and I don't mean to, but sort of digital whiteboards would be the classic example of this. Yes, of course we do technology. We've got a digital whiteboard. Yeah, that you write on, with a pen.
You're only picking on that because of what I said earlier. So the point here, anybody watching this, I have a particular thing about whiteboards. And this is something that we really were striving to do with SleuthIT. We've said to all the schools we work with, if you want to jump on Zoom and talk about it, I would rather do that and make sure that you're using it effectively, because I've been to too many schools who've invested $2,500 in a whiteboard, or even more money to put a whiteboard in every classroom. And then I walk in and see the whiteboard is supposed to be interactive and doing all these amazing things, and is being used purely as a projection screen. Now, for all the teachers out there who are saying, no, I use my smartboard as I should, fantastic. I'm glad you are, because $2,500 later, you ought to be. But I've been to too many schools where it's not being used properly. And I guess we came up against that in terms of schools are really struggling for money. And they look at SleuthIT and then go, okay, so how much is it per head? How much will that work out? Because now we're all struggling for money, whereas we used to have a glut of it. I've seen whiteboards put into whole counties.
Yeah.
And whatever the reason, not enough training, they weren't reliable, whatever, they're not being used. And we're absolutely adamant that SleuthIT will not be one of those things that sits on the shelf.
Yeah.
I would rather have 5 Zoom calls with somebody where they then say, right, now I feel ready to go and do that next bit, or how can I have some more ideas, or what do you think of this idea, Joe? Then not use our resource for education properly.
No, I think that's right. And I think, for me, the whole whiteboard thing became a box ticking exercise. Or, we've got to have those. They're the future. Well, actually, You know, you empowering the kids. I mean, one of the guys we've got on the chat, a guy called Jazz, was involved in a just amazing program that was engaging kids around sort of science and engineering, but in a really sort of physical, tangible way. They were sort of making model rocket cars and racing them and all that sort of stuff. But it's having the resource like that, or SleuthIT, and then having the teachers who really could grasp that concept and engage with the kids. And I think that's part of the dynamic, isn't it? I just wonder, Jake, without putting you too much on the spot, I don't know if you want to show us around a bit of SleuthIT and sort of show us a bit of what it is and what the experience is like.
I forgot about that bit. So let's try this out and see if this all works, because yeah, it did earlier. So if I do that, you should hopefully be able to see a little bit of this. I just prepared this silent show reel earlier. This is just to sort of give you an idea if it's behaving itself. So this is some footage from our youngest game, which is called Who Ate the Cake. Sort of cutesy graphics, and basically, you know, Mum has baked a cake and it's gone missing. This is from The Case of the Mummy's Curse, 1920s Egypt. And we have an inspector on the scene. You know, it takes us into the museum where a mummy is. And the idea of putting this together for you was just to show, hopefully, the kind of time and care we put and the attention to detail to try and make something attractive for the students. And behind all of these, the stories we hope are compelling. This is from A Riddle of Rome, where we try to take you right into the Colosseum. We have a series of panoramics in this, 360-degree panoramics, where you get lost in the back streets of Rome, looking for clues, looking for evidence. We don't have any blood, guts, or gore in our games. Very rarely there will be a body, but there's no violence. And in fact, in the case of this game, there's no body at all. Lions, of course. This is from The Mystery of Shakespeare's Globe. This is the scene from Macbeth. This is the Montagues and the Capulets, as you would expect. And then we've got Prince Aeschylus calling a halt to the action. So this is based on 6 Shakespeare plays, and we take action and we kind of parallel the themes of Shakespeare. I've had several teachers saying to me, you know, if you can make Shakespeare attractive for our 14-year-olds, and it's really been received well. This is from one of our newest games. It used to be a teacher's game, actually. We used it with our training sessions. But we've had such a good response to it. We've actually turned it into a game for students for secondary called The Time Machine. Yeah. So typically, our games, which we've just spent a lot of time on, Dave, moving to cross-platform. All of our games are typically, you know, episodic. This is from Who Ate the Cake. I'm going to show you a bit of a secondary game, actually. This is from Film Star Fatality. The student journal, the detective journal, kind of scaffolds going all the way through this. Here we would meet Chuck, who is one of sort of the Hollywood heartthrobs, but Helen Hartwell, who was going to be playing opposite him, has actually keeled over in the lobby of the hotel at the launch of a new film. We find letters, we find magazines. So this was a good example of where we try to differentiate and scaffold challenged readers. If I go into the magazine here, hopefully you see there's kind of an attention to detail and try and make it as much as like real life, like Hello Magazine. But what the students eventually twig is that there are clues in here. Now, for some students, this is going to be a lot of text. So what we do is we use Book Creator, and we use an amazing app called Book Widgets to actually create versions they can use where they can actually go in here, and then it will read to them.
George Gibson.
And it will highlight the text and read it back. Okay, you don't need a Book Creator account to do this, but if you do, then you can actually edit these. But with the publishing version of Book Creator that we use, we can take any of our documents, the diaries, the journals, and we can scaffold the student activity so they find the text is accessible, whereas before they may have found it to be a barrier. So here, let's actually go into the crime scene for a second. I have a look. Yes, that's probably as gory as it gets, by the way. Okay. Now I happen to know what I'm looking for. So here we find a phone, and it's fully interactive. And all of our challenges, all of our puzzles are designed that the answer to a puzzle or a challenge is totally logical. Nobody likes watching an Agatha Christie. You get to the end of the 3 hours, or you get to the end of the series, and a character gets brought in that has had nothing to do with it, and you're thinking, how would I have solved that? All of our puzzles make sense. And I'm not going to show you the answer to this because that would just give the game away, but just kind of show you this sort of interactivity that we do have. Here we have a locker. You'll have seen clues, and those clues would allow you to actually open this, but they're fully interactive and they're fully logical.
I love that, Joe.
Sorry, are you there, Dave?
Yeah, no, I am. I love that. Come back to us on camera because I want to pick up on a couple of things.
Okay, I just have to figure out how to do that. All this technology.
Yeah, no, I know.
Okay. Am I back now?
Not yet. We're still, there we go. 3, 2, 1, you're back in the room. God, so many things. First of all, that looks amazing. And I love the concept of being able to reach out and not just sort of engage the people using it, but inspire them too. Just as a byline, God, do you know what? It really reminded me of HyperCard. Not, I know HyperCard's like a really old technique, but just how amazing HyperCard was when we first saw it, right?
Exactly what it's based on. Exactly. HyperCard was a series of links, and my favorite game of all time, Myst, was built with HyperCard. And a very good friend of mine, Alan Goldberg, an amazing educator, he said, you've got to see this thing called Hype.
Right. So
Hype is like HyperCard meets Flash for HTML5. So you were asking earlier, how are they built? It's a two-man team, my wife and I. Those stories, the narration, and then it's realizing all the things that I hope would make me excited to get into the game and pull all those elements together. So then they're done with a lot of care. And
well, you can see that
to do that.
You can see that, and actually, Jazz has sort of come on with a really interesting point, and Jazz does a lot of work around. I'm going to say sort of computer science, but it's so much more than that, because it's not let's sit down and do some coding with Scratch or Python. It's about making something physical and learning. And Jazz does a lot of work with kids in India and Africa and sort of areas where they don't have access to lots of teaching resources, but he's been doing sort of remote coding. And I know that one of the topics that he's not just interested in himself, but he knows that the kids that he's engaging with are really interested in the whole sort of environmental sustainability thing. So you can imagine building, a game around, how do we irrigate this so we can feed the population and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, it seems to me that the model that you've got is almost infinite in its scale and scope in terms of what you could do. And I really love that.
Thank you. I mean, that is one of the exciting things. I mentioned the Sherlock Club, and we've got 3 of those written. We've got one that's written, but which you haven't realized. Currently, it's called Victorian Ghost Story. And I'm sure Fee's going to shout through the wall through next door if I've got it wrong, because she's watching this. That is really exciting, that we can explore an idea, think about how we're going to build it, realize that, and then actually be walking around it. You saw a little bit of the panoramic there, where you're tapping on things and things come to life and the rest of it. So yes, at the moment, touch wood, we have plenty of ideas. We've got 12 games, but soon there will be 16 to 18 of those. I think for the first time what's happening is that some schools are saying, okay, I've got this thing and it's working in year 6, but the kids want to be playing it next year, etc. So they're actually taking it on board.
Yeah.
So the thinking is going through 5 or 6 years. And to be involved at that level of a student's development is very exciting.
No, totally. No, look, I'm just slightly conscious of time, Joe. So there's a couple of things. If we want to know more about SleuthIT, where's the best place to go and find that?
SleuthIT.com. That's it. As easy as that, because there's a contact page and people are connecting to us that way now. What I'd like to say, actually, Dave, is, obviously we are selling a product, a resource. What I hope has come across is that it's a resource that's got real integrity, that we are building together, we're putting together to really engage with the students. So I offer a staff of a school a taster. It takes about an hour. Before that, I really like having 20, 30-minute Zoom to talk about a school where a teacher talks about what their situation is and how we'll fit with that. So if you want one of these chats for the coffee, just email me through the website. I'd love to talk to you and tell you what we're doing. It's as simple as that.
That's
it's not
fantastic.
A big fail. It really is not. It's about, is it going to work for you?
No, you had me with the whole whiteboard conversation, to be honest, Joe. And I think what teachers need now more than ever is people like you who are able to, they've got the ambition, they maybe sometimes lack the confidence and possibly the time to really, follow through. But knowing that they've got access to somebody like you and the sort of resources that you've built behind you, and especially now it's cross-platform, I think is a wonderful, wonderful story. So on that note, Joe, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on tonight and sort of taking us through that. It's just so... It's been lovely for me as we've been going through this journey and talking to people like you and some of the others that we had on the Creativity for Schools live stream, just looking at the amazing things and the creativity that's going into trying to not just inspire young minds, but actually, and Jazz, you're the same with us as well, to give them the skills that we know as technologists are going to be absolutely fundamental to their success. And I don't mean that in a commercial way. I just mean being able to give a good life, being able to offer value and be valued in the society they live in. So I think it's really lovely that we've sort of met and come across that. So Joe, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for giving me the chance to talk about our product and what we're trying to do with it. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you.
You're an absolute star. So on that note, I am going to leave you. We'll be back next week. Obviously, we've got news of a really, really special project. And when I say a special project, probably the most ambitious live stream we'll have done to date. So that's coming up next week. Thanks again for joining us. It's been great to have your comments on the chat as we've been going through. You know the deal. If you've enjoyed it tonight, give us a like. If you've enjoyed it and you haven't subscribed, subscribe as well. But if you've not enjoyed it, let us know and we can get involved and we can see how we can make it better for you. So on that note, thank you so much for dialing in. It's been great to see you, and we'll hope to see you again next week. See you guys.
There are 1,000 stories in the Envisioners' future. This is just one of them.